find your seats as I welcome you to the Sustainability Committee meeting of Wednesday, the 19th of February, 2025. We'll open with Karakia. Tu tau mai I rona, tu tau mai I raro, tu tau mai I roto, tu tau mai I waho. Ki tau ai te moritu, te moriora, ki te katua, homie, huie, tae ki ye. Thank you all, and again, welcome to the committee meeting. I'm joined here by our administrator, Natalia Kushnarenko, and governance advisor, Sarah Claridge, and lead officer being David Murphy, general manager for strategic planning, just to work through housekeeping, acknowledging the other members of the senior leadership team and officers who have joined us today. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Health and safety requirements are on the screen in front of you. I believe everyone in the room will be familiar with those, given that we don't have any members of the public in attendance in chamber today. Any online participants, please do keep cameras turned on and mics off. And if for some reason I fail to call your name before presenting, please do introduce yourself, and look forward to hopefully a smooth meeting in front of us. We do have a number of apologies. Turning to those now. The mayor for late arrival and early departure, both on council business. Councillor Fitzgerald for early departure. I'll look to move those, seconded by Councillor Zabellin, and there being no comment, we'll call for a vote. Passed 10 votes for and none against. I've had no notification of any additional items. Are there any declarations of interest? There being none, I've not had any notice of public comment, which moves us through to the next item, which is confirmation of the minutes. And noting that I was not present for that meeting, I might turn to the deputy chair to move those, and seconded by Councillor Hancock. Any points of clarification or corrections needed? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. And that's passed 9 votes for and 1 abstention. Yeah, I think I might have actually gone into autopilot mode there. Yes, I did, as clarified on the screen. Can that just be corrected in the record? Okay. To an abstention for me. Thank you. Moves us on to the first substantive item today, which is a deliberation on te kaupapahare moti tu vita me te manawaroa o te kai, the food security and resilience policy. Ask Julie McDonald, Strategy and Policy Manager, and Amy Viles, if you'd like to join, Manager, Community and Development, to present. Thank you. Welcome, Julie.
Tēnā koutou. I'm very pleased to be able to recommend the adoption of this policy to Council, and I thought I would make a, through the committee to Council, I thought I would make a couple of brief comments, just given that we are now at the end of this stage of policy development. So there was an initial request from E&M and the Manawatu Food Action Network, and Council allocated some new funding to enable policy development. Work began in October 23. Over the last 18 months then, we've been through research, engagement, drafting and consultation phases of the policy framework process. My thanks to Kate Harridge, who I may come along today, who've completed much of the earlier work, and also to the submitters and other contributors for their time and effort helping to shape this policy. Several amendments are proposed in response to the submissions, and these are discussed in Attachment 1. Overall, the policy, if adopted, will commit the Council to 3 main actions. The first is to embed food security and resilience objectives into its activities. The second is to advocate for food security and resilience to other decision makers. And the third is to support initiatives that promote food resilience and security. So next up, if adopted, an owner will be allocated to the policy. That's an organisational role. The owner will be responsible for developing an implementation plan, and that goes to SLT for endorsement. That will include the actions that have already been undertaken and committed to by the council. I just note that in this policy we're proposing that there be an annual report back through this committee on the implementation. We don't have that for all of our 41 adopted policies and bylaws because I think in this particular case there's such a strong community connection and need for accountability back to the community because it could otherwise be quite an amorphous implementation process, so that's why that's recommended. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Julie, and open for questions. Councillor Hopperton.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Julie. Is there a budget attached to the implementation of this policy?
Not thus far. However, when Council deliberated on the long-term plan, an initial budget for funding allocation was made that is now attached to the community development function.
So how much would that be?
I think it's $30,000.
So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Julie. It's just, it might seem a bit of a picky question, but anyway. In terms of the report that officers have put before us, I noticed that actions of elected members it's silent on actions of elected members. And in your introduction, you talked about input from the community and the input of staff. But I went back through the history of this policy development through council agendas, and there's been at least 3 stages where elected members have intervened either to request a report or to put budget in or whatever. But your report is silent on that. Is that what you normally do? You don't mention that council has pushed this along at any stage? Or do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, I think. So my enthusiasm for hyperlinking to other reports means that that quite extensive history is actually detailed in a previous report. I believe the August report of last year. So there's always a balance as to whether we have really long reports that go through the entire history or not. I mean, I guess I would normally expect to be describing explicit input from councillors where there was a workshop made possible or a survey was responded to. I think the decisions are recorded.
Okay. Just from my perspective, I feel we could be more explicit about where. You're going to ask me if there's a question. Would it be appropriate to state in reports where elected members have requested things to be done, or do you think that it's fine to kind of not mention any elected member involvement at all?
I mean, I guess there's a background section which describes council input, but I'm very happy to consider that in future reports.
I'll save it for comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Question for me, just in terms of at a practical level, what could the community expect to change as a result of this policy?
I think that's probably more of a question for you and your colleagues. I think the nature of this policy is to embed an approach within council activities, and while there'll be an implementation plan developed and then reported through SLT, obviously it's the kind of policy where it's not just governing a particular mechanism. It could have really far-reaching impact, or it could have quite minimal impact. Beyond changing how we do things we already do, that's going to be a resource question, would be my answer to that.
So most of the change that could be driven through this policy is resource dependent rather than changes to, say, operating styles or other policies or regulation type things?
No, sorry, both. I think it's both. So I think there's definitely opportunities to look at the way we do things now in order to achieve food resilience outcomes. However, if there was an ambition by council to have a significant new activity undertaken, then I would be very surprised if that would be something that SLT would consider could be done within current resources, given the current budget conditions.
Great, thanks for those points of clarification. There appear to be no further questions, so thank you, Julie, Kate, and others who have been involved in the mahi to date. I'll look for a mover for this. Councillor Zabellan, seconded. Councillor Hancock, and open for comment. Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'd be very happy to recommend to the council that we adopt this food security policy. And I think it's very timely and serendipitous, given that Manawatu Food Action Network yesterday hosted their seasonal hui in a new venue with lots of new faces. Our Amy Viles was there to give a presentation about the changes to the community garden guidelines, which is tangentially connected to this, and it was a very well received presentation, and she had people lining up to talk to her in the break, which indicates a lot of interest. And I also wanted to acknowledge Kate Harridge for an excellent and very comprehensive research report with a great deal of input from the sector, which has underpinned this policy. I think what I like about this policy is it is a mandate for council's involvement in certain actions that support food security and resilience, and the objectives that are in the policy are for the whole city, but it acknowledges that the best drivers and implementers of those actions to achieve those objectives are those who are doing it now already. It clearly defines what the community can expect from us when they come to us with food security proposals, and that is supporting community-led and community-driven initiatives that contribute to delivering those objectives for the security of the community, and especially for those on fixed incomes or of limited means. It's funding opportunities which are already in place and support from the team, civil defence responsibilities and guidance of the use of public land. And we have that funding in place already, and the objectives ensure that that funding will be targeted towards those activities that deliver on those objectives to best effect. And we have removed some red tape for public space use already, and that in itself is a massive step towards enabling groups to deliver on these objectives. I just wanted to note something that I picked up from the submission summary and a note from the officers. It's interesting that the proposed alignment, as suggested with one submitter, with Goal 1 was seen as too loose of a connection. And I thought it was interesting because Goal 1 is related to growth, and this is literal growth and growing of non-commodified opportunities. And to me, it sort of showed how narrow our view is on what growth contributes to development and what doesn't. And there's a reference in there to CEDA's Manawatu food strategy in the submissions table commentary, and that sort of showed quite clearly how we separate where food is a commodity to be sold, that's an opportunity, so it's Goal 1, but access to food and resilient food systems is a problem to be solved, so it's Goal 3 and Goal 4. So I just thought it was an interesting demarcation of how the entire food picture is not really captured in any one place. It's sort of separated out as to purpose. But this is a very good starting place to really tighten and clearly define what actions we'll take and how we will enable the community to best deliver on those objectives for the city. So I hope you will support this recommendation to go to council to adopt Te kaupapa here mo te tūwhita me te manawaroa iti kai food security and resilience policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And yes, I'm very happy to support this, as I have all along, actually, from when E&M and Food Action Network, Dave and Mads came to talk to us about it, which was on the 18th of May 2022, which just shows you how long it takes to get a policy put in place through council, and we're not even quite there yet. I wanted to acknowledge, first of all, that this has been a community-driven initiative. This is not something that came through from council. It came from the community, and council responded to it. And my questions to the officer were around, you read the report, and even if you reference back to the other reports, which I did look at them, there are still pieces of the story missing. And I do feel when we get to a point like this and we're looking back on how a thing was developed and what it took to get it from a community idea, a community proposal, to being an actual policy, I think it's important that all the steps in the process are recorded. So we get lots of presentations to committees, and some of them, we take for information and that's it. There's no action that comes of them. In order for action to come from a presentation, a couple of elected members have to be prepared to put that action forward and everyone else has to be prepared to support it. And that's what happened on the 18th of May. Myself and Councillor Barrett supported a further report. And then further to that, in September, when the report came back from office, budget needed to be put in to provide the resource to develop the project. And then at that point, again, it was myself and Councillor Hancock that put the budget forward for that. And then I think, if memory serves me, and again, this isn't in the report, that it was accidentally left out of the annual plan, the draft annual plan, despite us having voted to put it in, and that Councillor Zabellin and myself ended up having to put it back in during deliberations in May 23. So, to my mind, there's been a lot of commitment from elected members as a group, and, there's certainly been some people that have pushed this forward, but that isn't in the story that we've got here. And I do want the community to understand that, yes, it's very important that they bring their proposals to us, but it's also important that everybody works together. It's not just community and staff. Elected members have pushed this forward, and in fact, some cases pushed it forward a bit faster than staff were comfortable with, as I recall. Even so, it's still taken 3 years. So I'm happy to support the policy. I guess my comments are around making sure that we have the full story for these things. It is a win for community. It's a win for those people in our community who've been working for a long time in that area of food resilience and can see the value in having council on board as an ally and as an advocate and possibly as a facilitator. So I commend the policy to everybody, of course, but I think we need to make sure that we're telling the full story here and that community understands what's involved in getting these things pushed forward. So happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, for those comments, and largely concur with and would acknowledge indeed the work that's been done in the community, the work that's been done around this table, and the good work that officers Julie and her team, and particularly Kate, have done to bring the information to us that we could act on. And yes, it is a good case study in just how long it takes to go from a presentation to some action, albeit the beginning of action in the form of policy enabling further actions. But I do think this has the potential to be quite a pivotal moment in how the community, the broader community, experiences food resilience and food security in this city. Ultimately, it's going to be up to us around the table in terms of how much we put behind this. Not just the dollars, but I think some of the thinking about how we can do things better as well. But I'm very pleased to see this come forward and excited about the purpose it sets out around a city where, quote, every resident has access to healthy and nutritious and affordable food, and where the community is resilient in the face of food-related challenges. Like, that sounds exactly like the sort of future in city that we should be building and want to be building, and where the sort of place where people want to live, work, play, and indeed invest. And I thought the comments from Councillor Zabellin were particularly on point around actually the growth connection here. I think that having a place where food exporters can be quite proud of how well nourished the local communities are is actually a really sensible piece of the provenance that we want to have within this food basket that we have the pleasure to live within. Really like the way the policy does set out some quite clear framework in terms of our role. I also wanted to briefly acknowledge the voices in opposition. There was a thread of community voice that was concerned about this being something that was beyond their vision for what a council might do, and I just acknowledge their view around a preference for a narrower role. But in my view, there is a compelling case here for looking to the views and energy and commitment shown by others and other submitters in terms of ensuring that we do enable the expansion of food localism and resilience in the community. So I'm very pleased again to see us get to this point, and hope we all can find our way to supporting it today and through council. I think alongside what E&M is doing, MFAN, the improvements already around community gardens, there's just a huge amount of good momentum building in this space, and I think this gives it a really nice framework to continue to build momentum on. There being no need for a right of reply, we will move to the vote. That's passed 10 votes for, 1 abstention. Moves us to item 8, the wastewater treatment plant Nature Calls quarterly update, and ask Mike Monahan, manager 3 Waters, to join us at the table. And I believe we have Anna Lewis online, the project manager. Welcome, Anna. Welcome, Mike. Over to you.
Kia ora koutou. Good morning, Mr. Chair and councillors, Your Worship. Happy to bring this Nature Calls quarterly report to the table today. A quick just point of order. The report table on budgets on page 48 actually contains some incorrect data. So yesterday afternoon we did share with councillors a new table that had the most up-to-date and correct data in there. So apologies for that, but the information shared yesterday does contain the correct information. Yes, and with that, I'm happy to take the report as read and move into question time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. See if there's any questions from colleagues, starting with Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. My questions relate to the pathways that are described in 3.3 on page 46, the optimistic pathway. I'm just interested to have to understand what the timing might be for us to know whether that's an option for us.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Councillor, and the pathway and the timing is quite a challenge for us until the new standards are released. We won't have full visibility on whether we're going through a full RMA sort of BPO process again, or whether there's more of a shortened pathway for us. Anna's online, who may be able to give us some more insight into that, but we're just waiting for the national standards, which we have it on relatively good authority that we should have in the next couple of weeks to start looking at the first draft of that. But was there anything else to add to that?
We can't hear you on sound in the chamber, Anna. We might just double check if there's something on our end. Apologies. Can you try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you, Anna.
Perfect. It's just on the optimistic pathway. We are making a bunch of assumptions, and I just want to clarify that. And we do say in the report that Te Mata Arawai hadn't released any guidance on what this may look like. So this is us sort of trying to look at all potential options. However, what we feel may happen is that they make, if we meet the wastewater standard requirements at the end of the pipe, so that's the pipe as it discharges from the plant, they may make the RMA consenting pathway more permissive. And by that, that could either be a controlled activity, which is an activity that the regional council must grant, but with conditions, or alternatively as a permitted activity. And that means that we don't actually need to apply for a resource consent for it. So the provision is meet the standard. We assume the standard quality is high enough, and therefore we don't need a consent for that. If that was the case, that removes the requirement for the very complicated BPO process that's required under the RMA. What it doesn't remove is a requirement for other consents that were submitted as part of the original package a few years ago. So that includes things like discharge to air, any earthworks consents. So those won't disappear under this pathway. Hopefully that's clear, but we won't know until the standard comes out. So hence why we've just assumed 2 different programs at this point.
Thank you. So am I correct to understand that we should know that within the next couple of weeks? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I'll just caveat that, councillor, by saying that the standards that we'll see in a few weeks will be draft standards and open for consultation.
Okay, so my next question relates to the workshop next week, where I understand that we're down on a long list. Is that correct? That was
Well, we had a conversation yesterday with the Chief Executive and the Mayor, and we're talking about postponing that workshop until we have the standards, because
good.
there's
Okay.
not a lot we can achieve until we have the standards.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. I think the question that was on all of our minds. Councillor Zabellan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mike. My question is about the biosolids strategy update. So it's great news about the soil infiltration capacity. And so my question is, after we meet with Horizon, what's the next steps? Are we able to crack on with that at pace, or what's the situation there?
Yeah, so we're planning to meet with Horizons within the next couple of weeks, just trying to align diaries with people. What that meeting will be about is just to confirm that the area we're talking about is covered by the current consent conditions for the application of compost to the Awapuni site. If that's right, and we are covered by that current consent, then yes, we'll move straight into some kind of design phase to understand what the slope ratio is. At the moment, it's a very steep slope, and it might be too steep to apply biosolids to. So there may be a small component of work that needs to be done to prepare that site. But we need to meet with Horizons first to confirm that it is covered by the current consent.
Thank you. And if it's not covered by current consent, then we'd have to prepare something and begin that process?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
The Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies for a little bit of lateness there. Thanks, Mike, for the report. And Anna, you spoke about the possible need for no consent if it was a permitted activity, except for other consents. So just, could you tease it out a bit more? How many other consents are there? Are we talking about the building of a physical wastewater, plant, and is that what we're talking about?
So, yes, no, that's a good question. For the application that we submitted 2 years ago, we submitted the regional consents. So that included earthworks, discharge to water, discharge to land, discharge to air. And that was the package of consents that we needed to apply for based on the option that we had at that time. The other consenting packages that we didn't apply for and we were going to apply for later on are what we call the land use consents. And those are sorts of things like the territorial authorities control, such as land use consents for buildings, etc. We hadn't applied for those. And the wastewater standard is only relevant for the discharge consent, which is a regional council activity.
Okay. And if there was another option on the table and it was a permitted activity, would we still have to go through a lot of those other consents?
It will depend on the option that we select, but a usual package for a wastewater treatment plant upgrade, again, this all depends on what the standard requires and what work may be required to the plant. Will usually always require potentially earthworks in terms of disturbing the earth, and earthworks for regional consents are based on the size of the area, and discharge to air. Those are usually all applied for at the same time, and we do need to bundle them all together because regional councils require us to submit them all at the same time so they can consider all of the effects at once.
In your opinion, would they be the easier of the consents to obtain than?
Yes, we have been talking about that, so that is a very good question. Given the work that we did previously, yes, those are the easier ones. Based on the fact that the plans and policies aren't looking to be changed or amended for rules around air discharge or earthworks, they certainly would be simpler. something that we have been discussing as a project team would be whether or not those consents on their own could be potentially notified, and we're not sure yet because it will depend on the option that we go down
Okay.
in terms of the final discharge option, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much.
Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mike. Just looking at the project spend to date, there's a split between operational costs and capital costs. Can you just broadly outline the capital costs? We haven't actually built anything, have we? Or
No, so council, we do have some experts in the room could help me here, but my version of this is that before we made a decision on the BPO, everything up to that point was operational. When council made a decision on the BPO, it changed to a capital programme. So all the work that we've done since 2021, September 2021, has been capitalisable. Before that, it was all operational.
so we're still talking about the planning, the investigation, that sort of.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All the technical review work.
Yeah. Okay. It's just that when it's split up like that, you know, I was looking at that thinking to myself, well, I'm not sure that we've actually built anything. So how divided up in that way?
Yeah, it's more to do with financing rules.
Yes. So it's an accounting treatment more than anything else. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Anna and Mike. If I can just tease out the Mayor's questions around the other consents, please, Anna. When you're talking about to be notified, are any of those other consents at risk of triggering further RMA consideration?
I don't know if they necessarily trigger further RMA consideration. We would go through a process of, once we've selected our option, and again, if we remove the need for the RMA BPO process, we would then look at what our selected option is and what consents would be required. So let's, for argument's sake, say it's earthworks and discharge to air, just to be simplistic. We then submit those to council. There would be normally a consideration about whether or not those should be notified or not. So, you know, what is the interest of others in that application? Usually with sort of large wastewater discharges, there is a very high level of interest, and I would have anticipated this would have been publicly notified in its previous consent application package. Whether or not the air discharge and earthworks, they're much lower risk. Again, I can't be for sure, given we don't know what the option is at this stage, but much lower risk consents. So therefore, the possibility of it being notified should be much lower. Again, I'm being very speculative, sorry, but in that case, does Horizons consider that we need to notify or not? If not, you know, we end up with a consent decision. So hence the comment in the report that says even the post-lodgement, so that's after we submit the application, that program and budget could be significantly shortened as well.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks. Question from me, Mike and Anna. The recollection I have of the local water done well consultation document showed that there is quite different financial implications depending on the future model that we used. Is that a fair summary of that?
Yeah, that's a fair summary.
How then, when we're in the middle of consulting and deciding on that, can we ourselves take on a fatal flaw process around affordability when there's broad uncertainty around just about every economic angle on this thing?
Yeah, I think my simple response, and I might look to colleagues in the chairs over there to help with this, but my simple response is that we're just currently working on what's in the LTP and how that impacts the consultation for local water done well. We're just really looking at the LTP figures at the moment.
So we see in the paper there's a fatal flaw around affordability and there's a separate fatal flaw around LTP budget line. Can I just understand how those conversations are interacting then?
Not fully sure, Councillor, if I can give you much more. I don't know, look over there for some help. Cam, anybody?
Through the chair. Yeah, as you'll be aware, we've been progressing the Nature Calls project for some time. It's important for us to effectively continue to ring fence this project and continue on the path that it is, based on the assumption we do currently have in the LTP. The Local Water Done Well decision consultation document does identify putting this particular project into there because there are some benefits through being able to fund that program through debt at a lower rate. Hence the reason why that's in the Local Water Done Well program. However, until you make a further decision about the best practical option about a way forward, this project is carrying on its current course, which is in the LTP.
Thank you for that. Can I then get some information just around kind of the relative timelines here in terms of the pace that we're managing to move Nature Calls and the pace at which Local Water Done Well is kind of taking this out of our hands anyhow, and to understand particularly where there's demarcations around where we'll have substantially less influence from this table to kind of guide things and where the influence from other tables picks up.
So our objective as a team has been to present council with as much information as possible by around about June this year. We recognise that there's risk in that, and we recognise that that's a very truncated time frame, and we probably was going to bring in the workshop when we have the workshop around the risks of within that time frame. That was our original aim, to have something with information for this council. This council may choose a longer pathway if we don't have the information. Again, the risk I mentioned is the national standards will only be in draft, so that that will give us a steer. But until we've got the final document, there's risk involved in making decisions on a draft standard.
Thanks. And is that kind of seen as the dominant factor, kind of what happens on the standard side of it, rather than what happens through an economic regulator or the number of other councils that might be in a CCO or those kind of questions?
I think the standards are particularly important for the direction that this project takes and the deliverability of this project. It probably is another question around a CCO and how that debt's treated with a CCO.
Great, thank you. Further question from Mr. Naylor.
Apologies, Mr. Chair. The Chair's questions has just prompted a question from me. If we were able to go down the optimistic pathway and secure a BPO or Nature Calls option that was substantially less in cost, would that significantly change the information in the Local Water Done Well consultation document that we've recently approved?
Councillor, I think all the modelling has been done on the figure that's in the LTP.
Yes.
I would suggest that we probably need to run the model if we find ourselves in that position with a lower cost. We probably need to understand what that does with the model.
We'd need to understand what, sorry?
What implication that has on the financial model.
Yeah, and so that's really what my question is. Are we expecting that that would significantly change the information that we're already putting out there?
I mean, I would be speculating, but obviously a lower costing project would have financial implications on the model. I just don't know what they are because we haven't run the model.
So if it was a significantly less cost, would option 3 still be financially unsustainable?
Oh, I think I'm going to hand over to the A team for that one.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair.
Can we just get an introduction? Thanks.
Cam Mackay, General Manager, Corporate Services. Yeah, so obviously when we're thinking about Nature Calls and its relationship to Local Water Done Well, it is the biggest, I guess, capital program that would sit within any of those models. There has been sensitivity analysis done on what if type scenarios. So we can see clearly that if it's a lower amount, it has has a different price path for the end user. That's true for all of the options that's in front in that document. But the benefit of scale still applies in terms of the options that you have already seen. So whilst it would be lower, it could be a lower cost for all options, the price is comparably lower in each option. So you get the benefit as much in the option that you selected as you do in the others.
Okay, thank you.
That does appear to be the end of questions. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Anna, as well, for joining online. Colleagues will have a recommendation to screen in a moment that the committee received the report entitled Wastewater Treatment Plant Nature Calls Quarterly Update presented to the Sustainability Committee 19 Feb 2025, which I'm happy to move. Councillors Bell and happy to second, and we'll open up for any comments from the floor. There being none, I will thank officers for their, Mayor's coming in after me, which is just fine. I'll just start off then by thanking officers for their continued diligence on this, and include Anna and the consulting team as well. It seems that we're in very uncertain around, honest, with the only constant being change in terms of the environment that we are operating in, and appreciate officers' continued commitment and diligence to advance this as quickly as possible, and also as openly and transparently as possible with us and with the wider community. It does genuinely feel to me like you know, everything is up in the air in terms of where things end up landing around the regulatory frameworks, the economic frameworks, who we end up buddying up with, and where this project ultimately goes. And you kind of expect in a multi-year, multi-million-dollar planning and consultation exercise that kind of the closer you got to the finish line, you might hope that the uncertainty factor kind of feels like it's going away and you're getting an increased level of certainty. But if anything, it feels to me like we're kind of heading in the opposite direction in terms of not knowing exactly where the broader context is going to sit, and how some of the end-of-pipe standards, et cetera, might end up substantially influencing this at what is would otherwise be seen as being quite late in the piece. So I think we're in for a very interesting year ahead for this project and for the wider water services story, and look forward to continued support from officers and the information they can bring to us as that develops. Over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, it's a pity that Nature Calls isn't first, and the water well is secondary, because I'd have to disagree slightly. There is actually going to be some certainty, and at least we'll know what the standards are. At the moment, that is up in the air. So when we get some standards, I think there will be some solid ground to work on, and understanding what BPO options could be, and also whether actually there is a consent required. That was interesting to tease out that in questions. But it is around the wrong way. I appreciate that, and I think we've been through that in previous meetings. But there may be some time to get Nature Calls in its final sort of stages, and understand what the financial commitment, what the project actually ends up looking like, and then looking at what model option we look at in terms of being able to, one, build Nature Calls, and then secondly, operate and manage our waters. So I think there is some certainty coming. It is around the wrong way, I admit, but I would hope that we're in a better position come September at the latest. Thank you. And thanks to the officers for working through the mirage of stuff that's going on. Thank you.
Thanks. There being no further comments, we'll call for the vote. passed 11 votes for, none against. That moves us on to the committee work schedule. I'll just turn to the General Manager to see if there's any updates or comments around that.
Through Mr. Chair, no specific comments on the work schedule this morning.
Great, thank you. I'll look to move that, seconded by Councillor Zabellan. There being no comments or questions, we'll call for a vote. And that's passed 11 votes for, none against, which calls us to the closing karakia. Kia puta, ki te wao, ki te aumarama, whakamoia kia tina, homie, huie, tai kie. Thank you all, and we are in the Mayor's hands now for 2 workshops.
Thanks, Chair. If everyone's okay, we might just get